I was reviewing quarterly reports in my home office when the front door slammed with enough force to rattle the picture frames on my mantel. The sound cut through the evening quiet like a gunshot, followed immediately by the heart-wrenching sobs of my 8-year-old daughter, Emma. I dropped my pen and rushed to the entryway where I found her collapsed against the door, her small body shaking with tears that seemed too large for her delicate frame. The left side of her face was swollen and angry red, bearing the unmistakable outline of an adult hand. She looked up at me with eyes filled with pain and confusion that no child should ever experience. Through her broken whispers, she told me the unthinkable truth. Uncle Derek had slapped her because she received an A on her math test, while his son Tommy earned a C. The rage that flooded through my veins was unlike anything I had ever experienced, but I forced myself to remain calm for Emma's sake. She needed her father to be strong, not reactive. I knelt beside her, gently touching her uninjured cheek as she continued sobbing against my shoulder. The handprint on her face was clearly defined, the redness already beginning to darken into what would surely become a bruise by morning. "Daddy, I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just showed Aunt Rachel my test when she asked how school went. Tommy was sitting right there, and when Uncle Derek saw my grade, he got really angry." I guided Emma to the kitchen table, speaking in the softest tone I could manage while my mind raced with protective fury. "Tell me exactly what happened, sweetheart. Take your time." Emma wiped her nose with the tissue I handed her, her small hands trembling. "Uncle Derek said I was showing off and making Tommy feel stupid. He said smart girls who make boys feel bad deserve to learn lessons. Then he hit me really hard and told me to apologize to Tommy for being mean." The calculated cruelty of Derek's words made my stomach turn. I retrieved my phone and began documenting everything, taking photographs of Emma's injured face from multiple angles. The camera captured not only the obvious handprint, but also the terror still lingering in her eyes. Each click felt like gathering ammunition for a war I hadn't known I was fighting. "Emma, has Uncle Derek ever hurt you before?" I asked, dreading the answer but needing to know the truth. Her silence spoke volumes before she finally nodded. "Sometimes when we visit, he pinches my arms if I answer questions that Tommy can't. He says I'm making the family look bad because I'm smarter than I should be. Aunt Rachel always tells me to stop being dramatic when I try to tell her." My hands clenched around the phone as I processed this revelation. The man who had married into our family had been systematically abusing my daughter for months, and my own sister had been enabling his behavior. I forced myself to continue documenting, photographing the faint yellow bruises on Emma's upper arms that I now recognized as fingerprint marks. "We're going to urgent care right now," I told her, helping her put on her jacket. "A doctor needs to look at your face and make sure you're okay." The drive to the medical center felt endless. Emma's quiet sniffles from the passenger seat serving as a constant reminder of the injustice that had been done to her. Dr. Patricia Martinez, a kind woman in her 40s with gentle hands and a warm smile, examined Emma thoroughly while I explained the circumstances of her injury. Dr. Martinez took her own photographs and measurements, documenting the size and placement of the handprint with professional precision. "This is definitely consistent with an adult male striking a child," she said quietly, ensuring Emma couldn't hear. "The force required to leave this kind of mark on an 8-year-old is significant." She also examined the bruises on Emma's arms, her expression growing increasingly serious. "These older injuries show a pattern of grip marks. Emma, can you tell me how you got these bruises?" Emma looked at me for reassurance before answering. "Uncle Derek squeezes my arms when I say things that make Tommy sad. He does it where my sleeves cover so nobody can see." Dr. Martinez completed her examination and pulled me aside. "Mr. Johnson, I'm required by law to report suspected child abuse to the authorities. Based on what I've observed in Emma's statements, this appears to be an ongoing pattern of physical abuse. I want you to report it, I said without hesitation. I want everything documented officially. Dr. Martinez handed me copies of her medical report and the photographs she had taken. Emma is going to be fine physically, but I strongly recommend counseling to help her process this trauma. Children often blame themselves when adults hurt them. As we left the medical center, Emma held my hand tightly. "Daddy, are you mad at me?" I stopped walking and knelt down to look her in the eyes. Emma, listened to me very carefully. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Getting good grades is something to be proud of, not something to be punished for. Uncle Derek was wrong to hurt you, and it's not your fault that he made that choice. The relief that washed over her face broke my heart all over again. How long had she been carrying this guilt, believing that her academic success was somehow a character flaw? I realized then that Derek's abuse had been far more insidious than a single slap. He had been systematically undermining her self-worth and confidence for months. That evening, after Emma fell asleep, I sat in my office staring at the medical report and photographs. The evidence was clear and damning, but I knew that documentation alone wouldn't be enough to protect my daughter or ensure that Derek faced real consequences for his actions. I needed to be strategic about my next moves, gathering allies and building a case that would leave no room for Derek or Rachel to escape accountability. I opened my laptop and began researching Derek's background, searching for any information that might reveal other victims or patterns of behavior. What I discovered in those late-night hours would prove to be just the beginning of unraveling the web of deception and abuse that had been hiding in plain sight within my own family. The next morning, I drove Emma to school and then headed directly to the police station. Officer Jennifer Walsh, a veteran of the Domestic Violence Unit, listened carefully as I explained the situation and provided copies of the medical report and photographs. Her expression grew increasingly grave as she reviewed the evidence. "Mr. Johnson, I need to tell you something about Derek Hutchinson," she said, pulling up his record on her computer. "This isn't his first time in our system. He has 2 prior domestic violence charges from relationships before he married your sister. Both cases were dropped when the victims declined to press charges. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Rachel had married a man with a history of violence, and somehow this information had never reached our family. How is that possible? Wouldn't background checks reveal this?" Officer Walsh shook her head grimly. "The charges were filed in different counties, and since they were dropped, they don't show up on standard background checks. But they're here in our database, and they establish a clear pattern of escalating behavior." She continued typing, pulling up additional information. "I'm also seeing some financial red flags. Derek's been the subject of several civil complaints related to his construction business. Unpaid debts, contract disputes, allegations of substandard work. I provided Officer Walsh with a detailed statement about Emma's injuries and the pattern of abuse she had described. The officer assured me that Child Protective Services would be contacted and that Derek would be questioned about the incident. After leaving the police station, I decided to visit Emma's school to inform them about the situation. What I discovered there made my blood run cold. I requested a meeting with Emma's teacher, Mrs. Catherine Mills, and the school counselor, Mrs. Angela Foster. "I'm glad you're here, Mr. Johnson," Mrs. Foster said as we sat down in her office. "I've been concerned about some recent developments regarding Emma's academic placement." Mrs. Mills nodded in agreement. "We received a request from your family to have Emma evaluated for learning disabilities and possible placement in remedial classes. The request came through your sister and her husband during our last parent-teacher conference." I stared at them in disbelief. "I never authorized any such request. Emma is an honor student. Why would anyone suggest remedial classes?" Mrs. Foster pulled out a thick file. "Derek Hutchinson attended the conference with your sister, claiming to represent your interests as Emma's guardian. He expressed concerns about Emma's social development, suggesting that her academic performance was causing behavioral problems at home." "What kind of behavioral problems?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand the scope of Derek's manipulation. He claimed that Emma was becoming arrogant and disrespectful, showing off her grades to make other children feel inferior, Mrs. Mills explained. He suggested that placing her in classes more suited to her emotional maturity might help her develop humility and social skills. The calculated nature of Derek's lies was breathtaking. He hadn't just been physically abusing Emma, he had been systematically sabotaging her education while portraying himself as a concerned family member. I realized that Rachel must have been complicit in this deception, using her relationship with me to gain access to Emma's school records. Mrs. Foster continued. We found his concerns unusual because Emma has never displayed any behavioral problems here. She's kind to her classmates and never boasts about her achievements. But when family members express these kinds of concerns, we're obligated to investigate. Did you actually test Emma for learning disabilities? I asked. We were preparing to, but the testing was scheduled for next week, Mrs. Mills replied. Given what you've told us about the abuse, I think we need to cancel those assessments and investigate how this request was processed. I requested copies of all documentation related to Derek's involvement with Emma's education. The file they provided revealed months of correspondence between Derek and various school officials, painting a picture of a manipulative man who had been working behind the scenes to undermine my daughter's academic future. My next stop was Tommy's school, where I hoped to gather additional information about Derek's behavior. Tommy's fourth grade teacher, Mr. Brian Hughes, seemed nervous when I introduced myself and explained the situation. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, he said, glancing around his empty classroom, but your brother-in-law has been putting a lot of pressure on me regarding Tommy's grades. What kind of pressure? Mr. Hughes shifted uncomfortably. He's been offering me tickets to baseball games, gift cards, things like that. He says Tommy needs better grades to feel confident about himself. Last month he asked me to give Tommy a higher grade on a math test, even though the boy clearly didn't understand the material. I felt sick. Did you change Tommy's grade? I did, and I regret it now, Mr. Hughes admitted. Derek also brought in some of Tommy's homework that seemed much too advanced for him. When I questioned it, Derek said Emma had been helping Tommy study, but the handwriting looked exactly like Emma's work. The picture was becoming clearer. Derek had been stealing Emma's homework for Tommy to copy, then demanding that Tommy receive credit for work he hadn't done. When the grades still didn't match Emma's natural performance, Derek had resorted to bribing teachers and attempting to sabotage Emma's academic placement. There's something else, Mr. Hughes said quietly. Last week, Derek brought in one of Emma's art projects and claimed Tommy had created it. It was a beautiful watercolor painting that won our school's art contest. I knew it wasn't Tommy's work because the skill level was far beyond anything he's ever produced, but Derek insisted. I realized that Derek's abuse extended beyond physical violence and educational sabotage. He had been stealing Emma's creative work and giving credit to his own son, robbing her of recognition and accomplishments while building Tommy's achievements on a foundation of lies. Driving home that afternoon, I began to understand the full scope of Derek's systematic campaign against my daughter. He hadn't simply lost his temper and struck her. He had been waging psychological warfare against an 8-year-old child for months, undermining her education, stealing her work, and convincing authority figures that her natural intelligence was somehow a character flaw that needed to be corrected. The documentation I had gathered painted a clear picture of a predator who had used his position as a family member to gain access to my daughter and then methodically destroyed her confidence and opportunities. But I also realized that Derek's actions had been so extensive and involved so many people that dismantling his web of lies would require more than just police reports and medical documentation. That evening after Emma went to bed, I sat in my office planning my next moves. Derek had underestimated me, assuming that his position within the family would protect him from consequences. He had also underestimated the network of relationships I had built over the years relationships that would prove instrumental in ensuring that justice was served completely and permanently. The following morning, I called Rachel and requested an immediate meeting at her house. I kept my tone neutral, giving no indication of what I had discovered or the storm that was about to break over her carefully constructed denial. She agreed readily, probably assuming I wanted to discuss Emma's behavioral problems that Derek had so cleverly fabricated. I arrived at Rachel's house in the late afternoon, carrying a briefcase filled with medical reports, police documentation, school records, and photographs. Rachel greeted me at the door with a strained smile, her nervousness evident in the way she avoided making eye contact. "Brantley, I'm so glad you called," she said, leading me into her living room. "Derek and I have been worried about Emma. We think she might need some counseling to help her learn appropriate social behavior." I sat down across from her and opened my briefcase, laying out the medical photographs of Emma's injuries on the coffee table between us. Rachel's face went pale as she stared at the images of her husband's handprint on my daughter's face. "Rachel Derek assaulted Emma yesterday evening," I said calmly. "Dr. Martinez documented the injuries and I filed a police report. I'm here to give you one opportunity to explain how my 8-year-old daughter ended up with these injuries while under your supervision." Rachel's hands trembled as she picked up one of the photographs. "Brantley, you have to understand. Emma was being disrespectful to Tommy. She was showing off her grades and making him feel stupid. Derek just tried to teach her a lesson about humility. The casual way she justified child abuse made my stomach turn." "A lesson about humility, Rachel. He left a handprint on her face. Look at these pictures. Children need discipline," she replied, her voice growing defensive. "Emma's been getting too big for her britches lately. She thinks she's better than everyone else because she gets good grades. Derek was just trying to help her develop some character." I pulled out the school records and placed them in front of her. "Is this part of helping Emma develop character? Derek has been sabotaging her education for months, trying to get her placed in remedial classes, and telling her teachers that her academic success is a behavioral problem." Rachel glanced at the documents, but didn't seem surprised by their contents. Maybe that would be good for her. Emma spends too much time studying and not enough time learning how to be a normal little girl. A normal little girl. I repeated, hardly believing what I was hearing. "Rachel, Emma is gifted. She's been reading at a high school level since she was 6 years old. Her teachers describe her as one of the most naturally intelligent students they've ever encountered. And look how that's turned out." Rachel snapped, her true feelings finally emerging. "She's arrogant and condescending. She makes other children feel inferior just by existing. Sometimes I think Derek is the only one brave enough to tell the truth about her attitude." I stared at my sister, realizing that the woman I had grown up loving and protecting had become someone I no longer recognized. "Rachel, you're describing child abuse as if it's educational philosophy. Derek has been physically hurting Emma for months because she's smarter than his son." "Tommy is a good boy," Rachel said, her voice rising. "He tries hard and does his best. It's not his fault that Emma makes him look bad by comparison. Derek is just protecting his son from feeling inferior." I pulled out the information about Derek's background and placed it on the table. "Your husband has 2 prior domestic violence charges, Rachel. Did you know that when you married him?" Her silence confirmed what I had suspected. Rachel had known about Derek's violent history and had chosen to ignore it, probably believing that she could control or change him. "Those charges were dropped," she finally said. "The women who made those accusations were lying because they wanted money. Both of them, Rachel, listen to yourself. You're defending a man who hits children and has a documented history of violence against women." Our argument was interrupted by the sound of Derek's truck in the driveway. Rachel's face immediately changed fear, replacing defiance, as she quickly gathered up the photographs and documents. "You can't let Derek see these," she whispered urgently. "He'll be furious if he finds out you've been investigating him." "I want him to see them," I said, keeping my voice calm. I want him to explain to me why he thought it was acceptable to assault my daughter. Derek entered the house with his usual swagger, his work boots heavy on the hardwood floor. He was a large man, probably 6 feet 3 inches, and well over 200 pounds, with calloused hands and a face that seemed permanently set in a scowl. He stopped short when he saw me sitting in his living room. "What's he doing here?" Derek asked Rachel, jerking his thumb in my direction. "We need to talk," I said, standing to face him, "about what you did to Emma yesterday." Derek's expression darkened. "That little brat finally told on me, huh, figures? She can't handle being taught a lesson without running to Daddy." The casual admission of guilt was breathtaking in its arrogance. Derek wasn't even attempting to deny what he had done. He was proud of it. "You struck my 8-year-old daughter hard enough to leave bruises," I said. "What exactly did you think gave you the right to do that?" "Someone needs to teach her some respect," Derek replied, moving closer to me in what I recognized as an intimidation tactic. "Emma thinks she's better than everyone else because she gets good grades. She needed to learn that making other kids feel bad has consequences." I held my ground, refusing to be intimidated. "The only consequence Emma experienced was being assaulted by a grown man who feels threatened by a child's intelligence." Derek's face flushed red with anger. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Just like your precious daughter." "Well, let me tell you something, college boy. In the real world, nobody cares how many A's you get. What matters is knowing your place and showing respect to people who've earned it. And you think you've earned the right to hit children? I think I've earned the right to discipline kids who get out of line in my house," Derek shot back. "Emma was being disrespectful to my son, and I corrected her behavior. If you don't like it, maybe she shouldn't come around anymore." The threat was clear, and it revealed something important about Derek's psychology. He saw Emma's intelligence as a personal insult and her presence as a threat to his son's self-esteem. Rather than encouraging Tommy to work harder or celebrating Emma's achievements, Derek had chosen to tear down a child to protect his own fragile ego. "Derek, I want you to stay away from my daughter," I said firmly. "You're not to contact her, speak to her, or be alone with her ever again." Derek laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You don't get to make demands in my house, boy. Emma is part of this family, which means she follows our rules or faces the consequences." "Actually, Derek, I do get to make demands," I replied, pulling out copies of the police report. "Because what you did to Emma is called assault, and it's a crime. I filed charges against you." The color drained from Derek's face as he stared at the official documents. "You called the cops on your own family." "I called the cops on a man who assaulted my child," I corrected. "The fact that you married my sister doesn't give you immunity from the law." Derek's shock quickly turned to rage. "You self-righteous piece of garbage. You think you're going to destroy my family over some spoiled brat who can't handle a little discipline?" He took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. I could see the violence building in his eyes, the same rage that had driven him to strike Emma. But I was prepared for this moment, and I stood my ground calmly. "I think I'm going to protect my daughter from a man who thinks violence is an appropriate response to academic achievement," I said. Derek raised his hand as if to strike me, but I caught his wrist before he could complete the motion. Years of staying in shape had served me well, and I was stronger than he had anticipated. "That would be your third assault charge, Derek," I said quietly. "I wouldn't recommend it." He jerked his arm away, his face twisted with hatred. "This isn't over. You have no idea who you're messing with." I turned to Rachel, who had been watching our confrontation in terrified silence. "Rachel, I need you to understand something. If you continue to enable Derek's behavior toward Emma, I'll pursue criminal charges against you as well. Accessory to child abuse is a serious crime." "You're overreacting," Rachel said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Derek just lost his temper. It won't happen again." "You're right, it won't happen again." I agreed. "Because Derek is going to stay away from Emma, and you're going to make sure of it." As I gathered my documents and prepared to leave, Derek made one final threat. "You better watch yourself, Brantley. Accidents happen to people who stick their noses where they don't belong." I turned back to face him, my expression calm, but my voice carrying absolute certainty. "Derek, you've just threatened me in front of a witness while under investigation for child abuse. I hope for your sake that you're smarter than you appear to be." As I drove home that evening, I realized that the confrontation had revealed something crucial about the dynamics in Rachel and Derek's household. My sister wasn't just enabling her husband's abusive behavior, she was actively participating in it. Her willingness to justify violence against Emma and her complete lack of concern for my daughter's well-being showed me that I was dealing with two people who had lost all moral compass. But the confrontation had also shown me something else. Derek's threats and his obvious belief that he was untouchable revealed a man who had never faced real consequences for his actions. He had intimidated and manipulated his way through life, using his size and aggressive personality to control those around him. That was about to change. The quiet phone calls I had planned to make would ensure that Derek's reign of terror over my family came to a swift and permanent end. But first I needed to secure Emma's safety and begin the process of healing the damage that had already been done to her young psyche. The war Derek had started when he laid a hand on my daughter was about to become very real, very public, and very costly for him. He had underestimated the lengths to which a father would go to protect his child, and that miscalculation would prove to be the beginning of his complete downfall. That evening, after ensuring Emma was safely asleep, I retreated to my home office to begin making the phone calls that would transform Derek's life from comfortable to catastrophic. These weren't random calls for help. They were carefully planned contacts with individuals who possessed the power and authority to dismantle Derek's world piece by piece. My first call was to Marcus Thompson, my former roommate from Georgetown University, who had risen to become the district attorney for our county. Marcus and I had maintained our friendship over the years, bonding over our shared commitment to justice and our mutual experiences as single fathers. When he answered his personal cell phone, I could hear his twin boys playing in the background. "Brantley, what's wrong?" Marcus asked, immediately recognizing the tension in my voice. "You sound like someone died." "Someone almost did," I replied grimly. "My daughter was assaulted yesterday by my brother-in-law, and I need your help ensuring he faces the full consequences of his actions." Marcus's tone became immediately professional. "Tell me everything and don't leave out any details." I spent the next 20 minutes walking Marcus through the entire situation, from Emma's injuries to Derek's history of domestic violence, to the systematic sabotage of my daughter's education. Marcus listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed his prosecutorial mind already working through the case. "Brantley, what you're describing isn't just simple assault," Marcus said when I finished. "This is part of a pattern of child abuse that could constitute felony charges. The systematic nature of the educational sabotage suggests premeditation and planning." "What can we do about it?" I asked. "We can do a lot," Marcus replied with grim satisfaction. "I'm going to personally review this case and ensure it gets the attention it deserves. Child abuse cases involving repeat offenders get priority in our office, and Derek's prior domestic violence charges establish the pattern we need." Marcus paused and I could hear him typing on his computer. "I'm also going to have our financial crimes unit take a look at Derek. Men like him usually have other secrets, and we have resources to uncover them." My second call was to James Rodriguez, my former military buddy, who now ran a successful private investigation firm specializing in corporate security and background investigations. James had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before returning home to build a business that helped companies vet employees and investigate internal fraud. "Brother, you sound stressed," James said when he heard my voice. "What's the situation?" I explained the circumstances surrounding Emma's assault and the broader pattern of abuse I had uncovered. James listened with the focused attention of a man trained to gather intelligence and identify threats. Send me everything you have on this Derek character, James said. Full name, date of birth, social security number, if you have it, business information, everything. I'll run a complete background investigation and financial analysis. How quickly can you get results? I asked. Give me 24 hours for the preliminary report, James replied. If this guy has skeletons in his closet, I'll find them. Men who abuse children usually have other problems too. James paused before continuing. Brantley, I want you to know that this is personal for me too. My daughter is the same age as Emma, and if anyone ever laid a hand on her, I'd want the same kind of help you're asking for. My third call was to Caroline Webb, my former mentor from the financial services industry, who had left private practice to become a family court judge. Caroline had been instrumental in helping me navigate the legal complexities when Emma's mother died, and she had always shown genuine concern for my daughter's well-being. Brantley, it's late for you to be calling, Caroline said with concern. Is Emma okay? No, she's not, I replied, and proceeded to explain the assault and its aftermath. Carolyn listened with the careful attention of someone accustomed to making life-changing decisions based on limited information. This is unconscionable, Caroline said when I finished. An adult man striking a child over academic performance reveals a level of psychological instability that poses an ongoing threat. Caroline's voice took on the authoritative tone she used in her courtroom. I'm going to fast-track an emergency custody modification and restraining order. Derek will be legally prohibited from having any contact with Emma, and if he violates those orders, he'll be arrested immediately. How quickly can that happen? I asked. I'll have the paperwork filed first thing tomorrow morning, Caroline assured me. The restraining order will be in effect within hours, and Derek will be served with the papers before the end of the business day. Caroline, there's something else, I said. I'm concerned that my sister Rachel has been complicit in this abuse. She knew about Derek's violence and chose to enable it rather than protect Emma. That changes the legal landscape significantly, Caroline replied. If Rachel has been facilitating child abuse, she could face criminal charges and lose custody of her own son. I'll make sure Child Protective Services is notified and conducts a thorough investigation of the home environment. After ending the call with Caroline, I felt a sense of momentum building. Within hours, Derek would face legal, financial, and criminal investigations that would expose every aspect of his life to scrutiny. But I wasn't finished yet. My fourth call was to Dr. Patricia Martinez, the physician who had treated Emma's injuries. I wanted to ensure that she understood the broader context of the abuse and had all the information necessary to provide the most effective treatment for my daughter. Mr. Johnson. I'm glad you called, Dr. Martinez said. I've been thinking about Emma since yesterday, and I have some concerns about the psychological impact of what she's experienced. What kind of concerns? I asked. Children who experience systematic abuse often internalize blame and develop anxiety about their natural abilities and achievements, Dr. Martinez explained. Emma's academic gifts have been turned into a source of punishment and shame which could have long-lasting effects on her self-confidence and educational motivation. Dr. Martinez continued. I'd like to recommend that Emma begin working with a child psychologist who specializes in abuse recovery. I know an excellent therapist named Dr. Sarah Chen who has helped many children process similar traumas. I want Emma to have every resource she needs to heal from this, I said. Please make whatever arrangements you think are appropriate. There's one more thing, Dr. Martinez said. I'm required to report suspected child abuse to the authorities, but I want you to know that I'm also going to be documenting everything thoroughly in case this case goes to trial. Emma's injuries and the pattern of abuse you've described will be fully documented in her medical records. By the time I finished making my phone calls, it was nearly midnight. But I felt a sense of satisfaction that I hadn't experienced since Emma had walked through the door with Derek's handprint on her face. Within 24 hours, Derek would discover that assaulting my daughter had been the biggest mistake of his life. The network of professionals I had contacted represented different aspects of the justice system: criminal prosecution, investigation, family law, and medical documentation. Each would contribute their expertise to ensuring that Derek faced comprehensive consequences for his actions against Emma. But beyond the immediate goal of justice, these phone calls represented something larger. They were proof that building relationships and maintaining integrity over the years had created a support system that could be mobilized when it mattered most. Derek had operated under the assumption that his position within our family would protect him from accountability. He was about to learn how wrong that assumption had been. As I prepared for bed, I checked on Emma one final time. She was sleeping peacefully, her injured face finally relaxed and free from the tension that had marked her features since the assault. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of Derek's reckoning. But tonight my daughter was safe in her own home, protected by a father who would move mountains to ensure her safety and well-being. The war Derek had started was about to become very real, and he was completely unprepared for the forces that were about to converge on his carefully constructed facade of respectability. The next morning brought results faster than I had anticipated. James Rodriguez called while I was preparing Emma's breakfast, his voice carrying the excitement of a hunter who had found his prey. "Brantley, you're going to want to sit down for this," James said. "Your brother-in-law is dirty in ways you haven't even imagined." I moved to my office, closing the door so Emma wouldn't overhear the conversation. "What did you find?" "Let's start with the financial crimes," James said, and I could hear papers rustling as he reviewed his notes. Derek's been running an illegal side business using materials stolen from construction sites. He's been selling premium lumber, copper piping, and electrical components to unsuspecting homeowners at discount prices. The scope of Derek's criminal activity was staggering. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 2 years based on what I can document," James replied. But here's the interesting part. Derek's been using stolen materials on legitimate jobs too, pocketing the money he should have spent on proper supplies. Some of the houses he's worked on could have serious structural or safety issues. James continued. "I also found his gambling problem. Derek owes $47,000 to various creditors, including some very unpleasant people who don't accept payment plans. He's been stealing and selling materials to pay gambling debts." "Is there more?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. "Oh, there's more," James said with grim satisfaction. "Derek's been filing false tax returns for 3 years. He's claimed charitable donations totaling $38,000 to organizations that don't exist. The IRS is going to be very interested in those discrepancies." The picture James painted revealed a man whose entire life was built on deception and theft. Derek hadn't just been abusing Emma. He had been systematically defrauding clients, stealing materials, evading taxes, and accumulating massive debts through gambling. "James, I need you to compile everything you found and get it to Marcus Thompson's office immediately," I said. "Derek's about to discover that hitting my daughter was the least of his problems." An hour later, Marcus called with an update on the criminal investigation. "Brantley, your friend James has provided us with a goldmine of information. We're opening a full investigation into Derek's construction business, and I've contacted the IRS about the tax fraud." Marcus paused before delivering even more significant news. "But there's something else you need to know. We received a call this morning from Tommy's school counselor. She's concerned about bruises she noticed on Tommy's arms and back." My heart sank as I realized that Derek's violence wasn't limited to Emma. "Tommy's being abused too." "It appears so," Marcus confirmed. "Child Protective Services is conducting an emergency investigation of the home, and they're going to interview Tommy this afternoon. If they find evidence of abuse, Tommy will be removed from Derek and Rachel's custody immediately." The revelation that Tommy was also a victim added another layer of urgency to the situation. I realized that Derek's psychological manipulation of both children had been designed to pit them against each other while he maintained control through fear and violence. Later that morning, I received a call that I hadn't expected. Mrs. Angela Foster, the school counselor from Emma's school, had news that made my blood boil. Mr. Johnson, we've discovered something disturbing about the documents Derek submitted regarding Emma's academic placement, she said. The signature authorization form appears to have been forged. What do you mean forged? I asked. Derek submitted a document that purported to bear your signature, authorizing the school to discuss Emma's educational needs with him and to implement recommended changes to her academic program, Mrs. Foster explained. When we compared it to your actual signature on file, the discrepancies were obvious. The implications were staggering. Derek hadn't just been manipulating school officials. He had been committing fraud by forging my signature on legal documents. This added yet another criminal charge to the growing list of offenses. Mrs. Foster, I want that document preserved as evidence, I said. And I want every interaction Derek has had with school personnel thoroughly documented. We're already doing that, she assured me. The school board has also voted to implement new policies requiring notarized authorization for any educational changes involving children from divided families. That afternoon brought the most unexpected development of all. I was reviewing financial reports when my doorbell rang. Standing on my front porch was Tommy Derek's son, looking scared and carrying a small backpack. Mr. Brantley, he said quietly, can I talk to you? I walked here from school. I brought Tommy inside and offered him a snack, noticing the fear in his eyes and the way he flinched when I moved too quickly. Whatever he had come to tell me was clearly causing him significant distress. Tommy, are you okay? I asked gently. Does your mom know where you are? Tommy shook his head, tears beginning to form in his eyes. Mom's at work and Dad's really angry about the police coming to our house. He said it's all Emma's fault for telling lies about him. Tommy, Emma didn't tell any lies, I said carefully. Your dad hurt her, and that's not acceptable under any circumstances. I know, Tommy whispered. Dad hurts me too. But he always says it's because I'm not smart enough or strong enough. He makes me do things that I know are wrong. My heart broke for this child who had been living in the same environment of fear and manipulation that Derek had tried to create for Emma. What kind of things does your dad make you do? Tommy looked around nervously before answering. He makes me copy Emma's homework and turn it in as my own work. When I told him it was cheating, he hit me and said stupid kids don't have the luxury of being honest. The confession confirmed what I had suspected about Derek's academic fraud. Tommy, that's not your fault. Your dad put you in an impossible situation. There's more, Tommy continued, his voice barely audible. Dad takes Emma's art projects and puts my name on them. He destroyed some of her paintings because he said she was showing off. I wanted to stop him, but I was scared he would hit me again. The systematic destruction of Emma's creative work revealed another dimension of Derek's psychological abuse. He hadn't just been stealing her academic achievements. He had been destroying evidence of her talents to prevent her from gaining recognition. Tommy, I need to ask you something important, I said gently. Do you feel safe at home with your dad? Tommy shook his head emphatically. Dad says if anyone finds out about the things he makes me do, he'll send me away to military school where they teach kids respect through discipline. I'm scared of him, Mr. Brantley. I realized that Tommy had walked to my house not just to confess Derek's crimes, but to seek protection from his father's escalating violence. The boy had shown incredible courage in coming forward, especially knowing the risks he faced at home. Tommy, you're safe here, I assured him. I'm going to call some people who can help make sure your dad can't hurt you anymore. I immediately contacted Caroline Webb to inform her about Tommy's situation and his desire to escape Derek's household. Within an hour, a Child Protective Services caseworker arrived at my home to interview Tommy and document his statements about the abuse he had suffered. The caseworker, a compassionate woman named Lisa Grant, listened carefully as Tommy described months of physical violence, emotional manipulation, and forced participation in academic fraud. His testimony painted a picture of a child who had been living in constant fear while being used as an instrument in his father's campaign against Emma. Mr. Johnson, based on Tommy's statements and the evidence of abuse, I'm recommending that he be placed in protective custody immediately, Ms. Grant said. Given his expressed preference and your existing relationship with the family, would you be willing to serve as his temporary guardian? The request was unexpected but not unwelcome. Tommy had shown tremendous courage in coming forward, and he deserved protection from Derek's retaliation. I'd be honored to help Tommy in any way I can, I replied. That evening, after Tommy had been officially placed in my temporary custody, I sat with both children as they began to process the events of the past few days. Emma was initially confused about why Tommy was staying with us, but she quickly welcomed him with the generous spirit that Derek had tried so hard to crush. "Tommy, I'm sorry my dad hurt you too," Emma said, offering him one of her favorite books. "You don't have to be scared anymore." Tommy looked at Emma with wonder, as if he couldn't believe that the girl his father had taught him to resent was showing him such kindness. "Emma, I'm sorry I took credit for your homework and art projects. I didn't want to, but Dad said I had to." "It's okay," Emma replied with the wisdom of a child who understood that they had both been victims. "Your dad made you do bad things, but that doesn't make you a bad person." As I watched the two children comfort each other, I realized that Derek's abuse had inadvertently created an opportunity for healing and growth. Tommy was experiencing unconditional kindness for the first time in months, while Emma was learning that her intelligence and achievements could be sources of help and comfort rather than targets for violence. The domino effect that had begun with my phone calls was accelerating beyond even my expectations. Derek's world was collapsing as his crimes were exposed, and his victims found the courage to speak truth about his abuse. But perhaps most importantly, the children he had tried to destroy were beginning to heal and support each other in ways that would make them stronger than his violence had ever made them weak. The next morning brought a flurry of legal activity that would forever change the landscape of Derek and Rachel's lives. Marcus Thompson called early to update me on the rapidly expanding criminal investigation. "Brantley, we're filing charges against Derek today," Marcus said with satisfaction. "Assault and battery on a minor child endangerment, theft of construction materials, tax evasion, fraud, and forgery. The evidence your investigator provided has been corroborated by our financial crimes unit." Marcus paused before delivering even more significant news. "But we're also charging Rachel with embezzlement and child endangerment. During the investigation into Derek's finances, we discovered that she's been systematically stealing from Emma's college fund. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. How much money are we talking about?" $12,000 over 8 months, Marcus replied grimly. "Rachel's been transferring money from the account your late wife established for Emma's education and using it to pay for Tommy's private tutoring and therapy sessions." The calculated nature of Rachel's theft was breathtaking. She hadn't just enabled Derek's abuse of Emma. She had been stealing the money that my wife had saved for our daughter's future, using it to benefit Derek's son, while simultaneously sabotaging Emma's educational opportunities. "Marcus, I want to press charges against Rachel as well," I said. "She's been complicit in every aspect of Derek's abuse, and now we know she's been stealing from Emma." "Already in progress," Marcus assured me. "Rachel will be arrested this afternoon on charges of embezzlement, child endangerment, and accessory to child abuse. The fact that she used stolen money to pay for services designed to help Tommy compete with Emma shows premeditation and planning." An hour later, James Rodriguez called with additional information that would prove devastating to Derek's defense strategy. "Brantley Derek's construction business is finished," James reported. 3 of his major clients have terminated their contracts after learning about the stolen materials investigation. His business partners are threatening civil suits to recover money they believe Derek stole. James continued with evident satisfaction. "But here's the best part. Derek's gambling creditors aren't willing to wait for the legal system to sort out his debts. They've started calling in their markers, and they're not interested in excuses about criminal investigations. What does that mean practically? I asked. It means Derek's about to lose everything, James replied. His house is going into foreclosure. His business accounts have been frozen by the IRS, and his creditors are seizing assets to recover their losses. Even if he avoids prison time, which he won't, he'll be financially ruined for the rest of his life. The speed with which Derek's life was unraveling was almost breathtaking. Within 72 hours, he had gone from being a seemingly successful contractor and family man to facing multiple felony charges, financial ruin, and complete social disgrace. That afternoon, I received a call from Caroline Webb with an update on the custody proceedings. Brantley Tommy's placement with you has been made permanent, pending the resolution of the criminal cases against Derek and Rachel, she said. The boy's testimony about the abuse he suffered has been corroborated by medical evidence and witness statements. Caroline's tone became more serious. But there's something else you need to know. Rachel's attorney is trying to claim that she was also a victim of Derek's abuse and shouldn't be held responsible for her actions. That's ridiculous, I replied. Rachel actively participated in the abuse and theft. She can't claim victimhood now that she's facing consequences. I agree, but her attorney is going to argue that Derek coerced her into participating through threats and intimidation, Caroline explained. It's a common defense strategy in cases like this. However, Caroline had more encouraging news. The good news is that Tommy's testimony completely undermines Rachel's victim claims. He stated clearly that his mother actively participated in the schemes against Emma and showed no signs of being intimidated by Derek. Later that day, Mrs. Foster called from Emma's school with an update on the educational fraud investigation. Mr. Johnson, we've completed our review of Derek's interactions with our school system, she said. The scope of his deception is remarkable. Mrs. Foster continued, Derek forged documents, bribed staff members, and systematically undermined Emma's educational opportunities over a period of 6 months. We're implementing new security protocols to prevent similar fraud in the future. What about Mr. Hughes, the teacher who accepted Derek's bribes? I asked. Mr. Hughes has been terminated and reported to the State Education Board, Mrs. Foster replied. His teaching license will likely be revoked, and he may face criminal charges for his role in the grade manipulation scheme. The investigation had revealed that Derek's corruption extended beyond his own family to include school officials who had been willing to compromise their professional integrity in exchange for baseball tickets and gift cards. That evening, Tommy approached me with information that would prove crucial to the prosecution's case against both Derek and Rachel. Mr. Brantley, I need to tell you something about my mom, Tommy said quietly. She wasn't just going along with Dad's plans, she helped make them. Tommy explained that Rachel had been the one to research Emma's school records and identify opportunities for sabotage. She had coached Derek on what to say during parent-teacher conferences and had helped him forge the authorization documents. Mom said Emma needed to learn that being smart doesn't make you special, Tommy continued. She said Dad was teaching Emma an important lesson about humility and respect. Tommy's testimony revealed that Rachel hadn't been a reluctant participant in Derek's schemes. She had been an active collaborator who shared his resentment of Emma's academic achievements. There's something else, Tommy said, his voice barely audible. Mom and Dad used to talk about sending Emma away to boarding school where they could teach her proper behavior. They said you spoiled her by encouraging her to think she was smarter than other kids. The revelation that Derek and Rachel had been planning to remove Emma from my custody entirely showed the scope of their intentions. They hadn't just wanted to undermine her education. They had wanted to remove her from any environment where her natural abilities could flourish. As the day ended, I reflected on how completely the tables had turned since Emma had walked through my door with Derek's handprint on her face. Derek and Rachel, who had believed they could abuse and manipulate my daughter with impunity, were now facing criminal charges, financial ruin, and complete social disgrace. But beyond the satisfaction of seeing justice served, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the network of relationships that had made this swift and comprehensive response possible. Marcus James, Caroline, Dr. Martinez, and the other professionals who had rallied to Emma's defense had turned Derek's assault on my daughter into the catalyst for his complete downfall. Derek had underestimated the consequences of his actions, believing that his position within our family would shield him from accountability. Instead, his abuse of Emma had triggered an investigation that exposed every aspect of his criminal behavior and revealed him to be exactly what he was: a violent, dishonest man who had been preying on children and stealing from families for years. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation when Derek would come to my door seeking mercy from the very man whose daughter he had assaulted. But mercy was no longer mine to give. Derek's fate would be decided by judges, juries, and the legal system that he had spent so long believing he could manipulate and avoid. It was exactly 3 days after I had made my quiet phone calls when Derek Hutchinson appeared on my front porch, and the sight of him shocked me more than I had anticipated. The confident, aggressive man who had threatened me in his living room had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. Derek's clothes were wrinkled and stained. His eyes were red and swollen from crying, and his hands shook as he raised them to knock on my door. Through the window, I could see a battered pickup truck parked crookedly in my driveway, its paint faded, and one headlight broken. This was all that remained of Derek's once thriving construction business, and it looked as defeated as the man who had driven it to my home. I opened the door but didn't invite him inside. Emma and Tommy were in the living room working on homework together, their laughter and conversation a stark contrast to the broken man standing before me. "Brantley, please." Derek said, his voice hoarse and desperate. "You have to help me. You have to call off your dogs. This has gone too far." I studied Derek's face, noting the genuine fear and desperation in his eyes. The man who had casually admitted to assaulting my daughter and threatened me with violence was now begging for mercy like a child. "Call off my dogs," I repeated calmly. "Derek, I'm not sure what you mean. I simply reported a crime and let the appropriate authorities handle the situation." Derek's composure cracked completely and tears began streaming down his face. "They took everything, Brantley, everything. The police arrested me at my job site in front of my crew. The IRS seized my bank accounts. My clients canceled their contracts. The house is in foreclosure." He wiped his nose with his sleeve, a gesture that somehow made him seem smaller and more pathetic. "Rachel left me. She took what money we had left and went to her mother's place in Arizona. She said she never wants to see me again." I felt no satisfaction in Derek's misery, but I also felt no sympathy for a man who had brought this destruction upon himself through his abuse of children and systematic criminal behavior. "Derek, what exactly do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to tell the prosecutor that this was all a misunderstanding," Derek pleaded. "Tell them that Emma misunderstood what happened, that I was just trying to discipline her appropriately. Tell them you don't want to press charges." The audacity of Derek's request was breathtaking. Even facing complete ruin, he was still trying to manipulate the situation and escape responsibility for his actions. "Derek, Emma didn't misunderstand anything," I said firmly. "You struck my 8-year-old daughter hard enough to leave bruises because she performed better academically than your son. There's no misunderstanding about that." Derek's desperation deepened. "But I never meant to hurt her that badly. I was just trying to teach her some respect. Kids today don't know their place, and someone needs to show them boundaries." "By hitting them?" I asked. "By teaching them that actions have consequences," Derek replied, apparently unable to see the irony in his statement. I gestured toward the legal documents visible through my front window. "You're absolutely right, Derek. Actions do have consequences. Your action was assaulting my daughter. The consequences are everything that's happening to you now. Derek seemed to realize that pleading wasn't going to work, and his tone shifted to something approaching anger. This is vindictive Brantley. You're destroying my entire life over one mistake. One mistake, I repeated. Derek, the investigation revealed that you've been physically abusing Emma for months. You stole construction materials, evaded taxes, forged documents, bribed school officials, and destroyed my daughter's artwork. Those weren't mistakes, they were choices. Derek's face flushed red, and for a moment I saw the same rage that had driven him to strike Emma. You think you're so perfect, don't you? You and your precious daughter with her perfect grades and her perfect behavior. Well, let me tell you something about perfection, college boy. His voice rose as his anger built. Emma is going to grow up thinking she's better than everyone else because Daddy protected her from learning real lessons about life. You've spoiled her, and someday that's going to bite you both. I stepped closer to Derek, my voice calm but carrying absolute authority. Derek, my daughter learned a very real lesson about life from you. She learned that some adults will hurt children when they feel threatened by their achievements. But she also learned that there are other adults who will move heaven and earth to protect children from people like you. Derek seemed to deflate again, recognizing that his threats and manipulations no longer had any power. Brantley, I'm begging you. I'll lose everything. I'll go to prison. My life will be ruined. Your life should be ruined, I replied without hesitation. You're a grown man who hit a child because she was smarter than you could tolerate. You stole from families, defrauded the government, and systematically abused 2 children for months. The only tragedy here is that it took this long for your behavior to catch up with you. Derek stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact instant when he realized that no amount of begging or threatening would change his situation. The network of professionals I had contacted wasn't under my control. They were doing their jobs according to the law and the evidence that Derek himself had provided through his criminal behavior. Those phone calls you made, Derek said quietly. You knew exactly what would happen, didn't you? I knew that reporting your crimes to the appropriate authorities would result in an investigation, I replied. I knew that men like you usually have more secrets than just child abuse. And I knew that the legal system works when good people do their jobs properly. Derek nodded slowly, finally understanding that he had underestimated not just me, but the entire system of justice that he had spent years believing he could manipulate and avoid. What about Tommy? Derek asked. Can I at least see my son? Tommy doesn't want to see you, I said. He's been placed in my custody, and he's finally safe from your abuse. He's doing his own homework now, making his own art projects, and learning what it feels like to be valued for who he is, rather than punished for who he isn't. Derek's shoulders sagged as he absorbed this final blow. His son, the child he had claimed to be protecting through his abuse of Emma, wanted nothing to do with him. As Derek turned to leave, I called after him. Derek, there's something you should understand. This wasn't about revenge or vindictiveness. This was about protecting children and ensuring that you face appropriate consequences for your choices. Derek paused but didn't turn around. What am I supposed to do now? You're supposed to accept responsibility for your actions, serve your sentence with dignity, and spend the rest of your life making amends for the damage you've caused, I replied. You're supposed to get the help you need so that you never hurt another child again. Derek walked to his truck without another word, and I watched him drive away, for what I knew would be the last time. 3 days later, he would accept a plea agreement that included 5 years in prison, full restitution for the money he had stolen, and permanent restraining orders prohibiting him from contacting Emma, Tommy, or any member of our family. Rachel, facing her own criminal charges for embezzlement and child endangerment, accepted a plea deal that included 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, and the permanent loss of custody rights for Tommy. She disappeared to Arizona and never attempted to contact any of us again. In the months that followed Derek's arrest, Tommy flourished in his new environment. Free from his father's violence and manipulation, he discovered his own academic strengths and developed genuine friendships with classmates who valued him for his kindness rather than his performance relative to Emma. Emma returned to her advanced academic placement and quickly regained the confidence that Derek had tried to destroy. Dr. Martinez connected us with Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist who helped both children process the trauma they had experienced and develop healthy strategies for dealing with difficult emotions. 6 months after Derek's imprisonment, Emma won the state science fair with a project on renewable energy that she had designed and executed entirely on her own. Tommy cheered louder than anyone when her name was announced, genuinely proud of his adoptive sister's achievements. The legal adoption of Tommy was finalized 8 months after Derek's arrest, creating the family unit that both children had always needed. Emma gained a brother who truly supported her success, while Tommy gained a sister who valued his unique talents and a father who encouraged his growth rather than demanding his submission. Dr. Martinez became our family pediatrician, monitoring both children's physical and emotional health as they continued to heal from Derek's abuse. Officer Walsh checked on us regularly during the first few months, ensuring that the restraining orders were being respected and that the children felt safe in their new circumstances. The school system implemented comprehensive new policies to prevent the kind of fraud and manipulation that Derek had perpetrated. Background checks became mandatory for anyone seeking to influence a child's educational placement, and all authorization documents required notarization and verification. Mr. Hughes, the teacher, who had accepted Derek's bribes, lost his teaching license permanently and faced criminal charges for his role in the grade manipulation scheme. His conviction sent a clear message to other educators about the consequences of compromising their professional integrity. As I reflect on this experience now, I realize that Derek's assault on Emma revealed something profound about the nature of protection and justice. The immediate instinct when someone hurts your child is to respond with anger and violence to meet force with force and pain with pain. But true protection requires something deeper and more lasting than immediate retaliation. True protection means building relationships with good people before you need their help. It means understanding systems and institutions well enough to use them effectively when circumstances require intervention. Most importantly, true protection means teaching children that their worth isn't dependent on the approval of people who would hurt them, and that there are always adults willing to stand up for what's right when children cannot protect themselves. Emma and Tommy learned that academic achievement is something to celebrate, not something to fear. They learned that adults who truly care about children encourage their growth rather than punishing their success. And they learned that justice, while sometimes slow, is ultimately more powerful than the temporary advantages that bullies and abusers believe they possess. The life lesson that emerged from this painful experience is simple but profound. When someone hurts your child, your response should be measured not by the intensity of your anger, but by the completeness of your preparation and the strength of your character. Protecting children requires patience, wisdom, and the courage to build support systems that can respond effectively when protection becomes necessary. It requires understanding that justice served through proper channels is always more powerful and lasting than revenge pursued through anger. Derek learned too late that actions truly do have consequences, and that the consequences of harming children extend far beyond the immediate moment of violence. His life was destroyed not by my anger, but by his own choices, and the inevitable response of a society that values the protection of children above the comfort of those who would harm them. Emma and Tommy are thriving today, their bond as siblings stronger than the abuse that Derek tried to create between them. They support each other's achievements, comfort each other's fears, and face the future with the confidence that comes from knowing they are truly loved and protected. That is the real victory in this story. Not Derek's imprisonment or financial ruin, but the healing and growth of two children who refused to let his violence define their worth or limit their potential. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to convince you that a child's success was somehow harmful to other children? How do you think we can better protect children from adults who feel threatened by their achievements? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and share it with others who might benefit from understanding how proper preparation and strong relationships can protect children from those who would harm them. Subscribe for more stories about justice, healing, and the power of doing what's right even when it's difficult. Thank you for taking the time to hear Emma and Tommy's story. I hope it reminds you that children's achievements should always be celebrated, never punished, and that there are always good people willing to stand up for what's right when it matters most. May you find the courage to build the relationships and support systems that make true protection possible. And may your children always know that their worth is measured by their character, not by how they compare to others.